You're listening to Three Kitchens Podcast, a member of the Alberta Podcast Network. Locally grown, community supported. Now it's time to find out what's cooking today.
This episode is brought to you by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider in Alberta, offering internet, electricity, and natural gas with low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your internet, electricity, and natural gas from. If you choose Park Power, you are choosing a positive local business. Plus, Park Power shares its profits with local not-for-profits that are working to make a difference in their communities. Shopping local is very important to Park Power's owner, Chris Kozowski, and we love local here at Alberta Podcast Network, so it's a great fit. Learn more at parkpower.ca.
Welcome once again to Three Kitchens Podcast. We are your hosts. I am Heather. Over there is Erin.
Hello.
I almost said the wrong name. I almost said that I was Erin. What is happening? It's Monday morning. That's how it's going to go. Okay. Yeah. But for this episode, we tried something that neither of us had done before, and that was to make sourdough bread, but not just sourdough bread, but sourdough starter.
The whole process.
We made our own starter right from scratch, and then to bake bread. And to help us and teach us a little bit about it, we have a special guest. You're going to hear from Larry Harris, who took up baking and cooking as a hobby. He sort of had always liked messing around in the kitchen, as we all do. And then he went with his wife for their honeymoon to Paris and really got into bread and was like, oh, this bread is so amazing. How can I make it at home? Because according to him, he couldn't find artisan bread like that.
And why not go play in the kitchen and try to create it yourself? That's
great
inspiration when you go somewhere and you experience it and you're like, I want to bring this to my home.
Yeah, exactly. So he used his time in the kitchen as a creative outlet from his day job, and he was making bread and goodies and cakes and all kinds of stuff. And eventually he grabbed a spot as a contestant on the Great Canadian Baking Show, season 4. And he knows his breads because he proved it by earning the title of Star Baker for Bread Week on his season of Great Canadian Baking Show. Whew. So he's got a lot to teach us about sourdough.
Yeah, I love that he comes to this from a completely self-taught position. Mm-hmm. And he brought to us this fantastic it's not even recipes. He guided us through this whole process because there's so much out there on sourdough and sourdough baking, and it immediately seemed really intimidating. And so having him bring his method to this and troubleshoot with us and really help us to make sourdough happen.
There were multiple pages of instructions and recipes.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that it's complicated. It's just he's very thorough.
Yeah. And giving us different options, different methods and techniques.
Yeah, and he talked about having a spreadsheet for when he bakes bread, and he can calculate how much of each flour and whatever. He's like, he really...
Yeah, he knows
Larry and Erin and their science brains came together, and I just sat back and like, okay, whatever. I'm not making a spreadsheet.
Aw.
You know me, okay? I can just tell you, we're going to get into... With Larry, we're going to talk about the bread that Erin baked. Mm-hmm. I'll just tell you that because I made this attempt at baking the bread after we recorded with Larry. So I'll just give you a quick status on that. And we don't want to get into it too far because it didn't work out for me so well. I believe my trouble was in the proofing stage. I was too distracted and not paying attention. And I think I vastly overproofed my bread. So pay attention to that, everybody. And Larry's got some great tips and advice for how to not only create your starter, but bake the bread itself. And Erin, you learn from Erin's experience as well, because she's, how many loaves have you baked now?
I think I'm into my 4th loaf now. So I'm trying to do it weekly as he suggested, because my starter can live in the fridge over the week. And then I bring it out on Thursday and I start getting it ready and then start making it on Friday. And by Sunday, we've got this loaf of bread for the week again. And it is really fun to do. So
one more thing. We did a fun thing with Larry at the end of the episode.
Yes.
And instead of a rapid fire question segment, I came across this little quiz on BuzzFeed.com that was, what kind of bread are you?
That's right.
I asked him the questions. He gave me the responses and I filled it in as best I could for him. And then we came up with his response. So you'll hear that at the end of the episode. But Aaron and I also took the quiz and mine came back as banana bread. Technically, it's not a bread, but everybody loves it. I was like, what are you trying to say here?
Well, I came back as a pretzel.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which I'm a little bit twisted and salty. So.
I kind of like that. I think that's kind of accurate.
Oh, dear.
I'm an imposter. I'm going around pretending to be the real deal, apparently. But I'm lovable.
There you go.
That's all right.
You're lovable. I'm salty.
Well, enjoy this chat with Larry. I hope you learn lots about baking sourdough.
Yeah.
Let us know how it goes.
And contact him if you have questions or wonder anything, because he is a fabulous resource. Even if you've already tried to do it or you're having issues with something you're baking bread-wise, he does some amazing stuff in his home kitchen. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he's so open to it. You can just send him a message on Instagram and he'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Enjoy.
Hi, Larry.
Hi.
We are really excited to have you here today to talk about baking better bread at home. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into being a home baker?
Sure. I think I've baked or cooked a lot of my life, but I really got into baking after my wife and I went on our honeymoon, and we went to France, Paris, and southern France, and just seeing just enjoying a baguette, fresh baguette, and all the pastries and all this other stuff. It just was amazing, and that's not something back in the early '90s that you could really get a lot of in Edmonton or Alberta.
Right.
It wasn't as easy to find as it is nowadays. And that's when I really started baking and doing a lot more baking and just getting into it then.
And did you like take classes or were you just self-taught?
It's all been self-taught. I've never taken any baking classes. And actually, the first time I took any cooking classes was a couple of weeks ago. I took a short course on marmalade and one on making candied fruit.
Oh, wow.
First time I've ever taken any courses. All self-taught.
Oh, wow.
Cool. Okay, so all of this home baking experience led you to season 4 of the Great Canadian Baking Show. For those who may not be as familiar with the show, let me just tell you what the description is from CBC. 10 amateur bakers from around Canada compete against one another in a series of challenges over 8 weeks. It is described as an affirming, warm-spirited competition that celebrates personal achievement and the joy of baking. And when you watch it, it really is so nice. Everybody is so nice and encouraging. I mean, this is not somebody barking at you and calling you a donkey for not getting perfect feet on your macarons. Like this is like very encouraging and just looked like so much fun. How did you end up on the show?
Oh, yeah. So it is so much fun. It's totally as it's described, except I wouldn't say we're competing against each other. We're competing and doing better for ourselves. It just happens there's a bunch of other people around us. It was a long journey. So the Great Canadian Baking Show is kind of a sister show for the Great British Bake Off. And so I started watching that and really, really enjoyed that. And then when it got announced that the Great Canadian Baking Show was going to be on, I applied that first year. Didn't get an interview that year. I kept applying and I got an audition in years 2 and 3, which were in-person auditions, which was held at the baking kitchens for NAIT, which is a technology school here in Edmonton. So you actually went there and you baked something there. They'd give you like a little mini technical bake to do, and you had to bring something in to show them what you could do and have them taste, and they'd interview you and talk to you. And then COVID came along and it kind of delayed things because it impacted their normal auditioning process. And I did a virtual audition with them and got on in 2020, which was when they filmed season 4, and it was magical.
That's pretty cool.
That's a really cool process to go through.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people in each season.
No, there's 10. So now it's 6 seasons in, so there's 60 people. you're close with the people that you're with on your season, and then you're also close with everyone else as well. And we also get together whenever we can in different cities. I was just recently in Vancouver and got together with Sheldon, who was on my season, and also Lauren, who was the winner of season 6, and also got together with Karen, who was on season 5.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
fantastic. What an awesome
Yeah.
community.
Mm-hmm. So what did you have to do to get ready? Did you feel like you had to like, we recently had someone on the show who competed in a Netflix bartending competition show, which would not be called Warm Spirited and
Spirited.
it was spirited for sure. She spent an awful lot of time in advance, like learning skills that she thought she might need and didn't know for sure if she would. Like, how much do you get in advance that you need to work on?
For people not familiar with the show, there's 3 kind of segments on the show. There's a signature bake, which is something you would typically bake. And then there's a technical, which you're just given a recipe. It's missing information. You have to figure it out and produce something that looks what they want it to look like. And then there's the showstopper, which is something grand and something you'd never make, because no one ever makes 3-tiered cake for their family. Is this not something you do?
Yeah.
So for the signature and showstopper, they give you briefs in advance. This is what it's going to be for this week. Come up with a recipe. So you have to come up with an idea recipe, get it approved by them to make sure that not everyone's doing the same type of thing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to get your recipe in right away so that you can do what you want to do. And so you can practice that. We started getting these probably a month and a half before the show filmed. So we could practice.
Okay.
They all have to be your own recipes. You can't pull a recipe from a book and just submit that. They all have to be your own recipes. And then you submit them and develop all your recipes for all the shows. For the technicals, you need to know how to do things, because there's going to be information missing. It'll say make choux pastry, and you have to know how to make choux pastry, because it won't give you any information on how to do it. So you need to have some technical skills. So
do you at least get the list of ingredients when it comes to those technicals, or is it totally?
It varies. When you see us lifting the thing or telling us what we're doing, that's when we're finding out what the recipe is and what we're supposed to make.
Wow.
We have no advance warning. We have the 2 hours or an hour and a half or whatever it is to do whatever. So the recipe will often list ingredients. It may not have quantities. It may be missing a step. It might be just say make choux pastry as an example, and with no instructions. It might give you, they'll have all the ingredients there and you can do it, but the technique is something you might have to fill in and make. And then you want to try and get it to look what they want it to look like, which you don't have any clue what. So there's often a lot of variation as to how things turn out.
I always find it fun to listen. People are saying like, oh, I've never seen this before. I don't know what this is supposed to look. Well, I hope this is what it's supposed to look like.
Exactly. Because they do film it 2 days in a row, like just as it's presented on TV. They have a signature, and then we have a little bit of a break for lunch, and then we do the technical, and then the next day is the showstopper. So usually at the lunch, we're talking, so what do you think the technical is going to be? And we throw ideas back and forth, and we are invariably not correct, but sometimes we're close, but fun trying to figure out what they might give us based on what they've done in the past.
For the listeners too, in case they don't know, each episode is it's around a theme. So one episode is all about cookies. One episode is all about pastries. One's all about bread. And that's the one that you were the star baker for that week.
Yeah, that was a great week. And everyone seems to have some sort of strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people knew that my strength was probably bread. And so the producers are always trying, so is this your week to win? Is this? And it's like, no, I'm not going to say anything, because if you say things like that you're going to win, you're invariably not going to win, and you're probably going to go home that day. So I was very careful not to say anything. But I was very, very proud of my recipes that I created for that week. And luck might be somewhat, the technical was making pretzels, which I've made pretzels before. So that was good. I knew what to do with that. Although they gave us lye to use, which was, it's not something I'd ever used before, but it's something I would use forever going forward, making pretzels, because it actually makes a huge difference.
Oh, interesting.
I made pretzels for the podcast a long time ago. I did not use lye. I was like, that sounds scary. I'm not going that. Nope, not doing that.
Don't put your hands in it.
Yeah.
Now, you're allowed to bring some things with you. And one of the things you brought in was cheese, wasn't it? Did you
Yes.
made your own brie cheese?
Yes, that is correct.
I was like, what? Where'd he pull that out of? Oh, I just made, he's like, oh yeah, I made it.
I just made
Like,
some
what?
cheese.
Yeah. The short story on cheese is a group of us got together making cheese, following a bunch of recipes in a book. We did this over a year, and we met once a month, and we would make different cheeses through this book to learn the process and stuff like that. And so that's where I picked up making cheese. But I did make my own brie, which I think is pretty tasty. And Bruno liked it. So when a Frenchman loves your brie cheese, that's always a good thing. I was probably a little bold with my showstopper that week because I'd also made a board that was a map of France out of wood.
That's
and
right. That's
the
right.
breads were all French style breads, and it worked. He liked
You
it.
took a chance with the French judge. Yeah.
Yes, big chance.
When you put it all out there, and for somebody who is French to get that feedback.
Brie's relatively easy. You have to throw some different molds and stuff in it, and you have to treat it special, but you don't have to have a press or weight on top of it like you would with a cheddar or another hard cheese. But it's definitely something that's approachable and easily done in a home.
Well, it's very cool. And then to put that in your homemade bread, no wonder you were the winner of Bread Week.
One thing that I found the whole time watching this is how intense the time aspect was. Just to get down to the point where you're comfortable doing those things as rapidly as you are demanded to is incredible.
And then you get interrupted by people asking questions and things like that. And
how do you not tell them to be like, go away?
You do sometimes.
I'm busy.
They actually do respect that. If you're in the middle of something and you just give me some space, they'll back off a little bit, but they'll hover. I am my background is more using Excel and stuff like that. So I actually had just about every minute planned out for every recipe that I could look at it and say, okay, if I'm doing this step, I should be at this point with the time, or if it's at this time, I should be at this step to help gauge how things are going. I mean, they give you times that you can do these things in. You sometimes have to take some shortcuts to make things happen in that time. Like normally, if you're making a custard, you would put it in the fridge and let it sit there for 6 hours or whatever. You don't have time to do that. So you have to spread it thin, stick it in the freezer or things like that so you can get it in 15 minutes instead of 6 hours. So you have to figure out tricks like that to help with your time management, different techniques to do things quicker.
I love the Excel spreadsheet way of doing things because that's what I think I would have to do if I was going to get anything done in that time, especially when you're doing multiple things at once.
You would be fine, Erin. I would be out immediately. I wouldn't even make it on the show. I'm too disorganized. I'd be like, whoa, all over the place. It would not work. It's kind of funny when you think about it because it's really not reflective of how a home baker actually bakes at home, right? Like you have time.
How did all the dishes get done? That was the other thing.
Oh, the dishes.
Yeah, how did you deal with the dishes?
I didn't have to deal with the dishes, which is the wonderful thing. And you just put them in this bin and these magical elves took it away.
Nice.
But if you needed something, it would either show up magically because they're mind readers. A big shout out to the crew that is the culinary crew that's either getting you ingredients or getting you tools that you need. They do this stuff in advance. That's one reason you have to do a recipe so they know what to give you in terms of ingredients and tools that you need. But also they're there to help you out. If you need another bowl for your mixer, you can just ask. Because you're all mic'd up and they're this thing, so you can say, can I get an extra bowl or something like that? And then it will come. You don't see these people on the show because they're all hidden in the background.
They're edited out.
Magic of TV. But you just say, can I get an extra bowl? And that works great there. It didn't work when I came home because my wife tried that. I said, no, you can't do that. You do that yourself. But
of course,
you got spoiled.
You really were spoiled. The background crew that you don't see are amazing.
So fun.
Big shout out to those guys and gals.
Well, we have other bread to talk about, so let's take a quick break to pay the bills, as they say, and then we'll be right back. This episode of Three Kitchens Podcast is brought to you by the Well Endowed Podcast. The Edmonton Community Foundation helps people create endowment funds. The podcast tells the stories of how those endowments intersect with the community. The Well Endowed podcast explores the impact of passionate people who are working to make Edmonton a strong, vibrant city to live in. Subscribe at thewellendowedpodcast.com.
Welcome back. We are here with Larry, and we are going to dive into the sourdough recipe that he gave us.
Mm-hmm.
I personally loved this because I did not fall down the sourdough learning hole that everybody did during COVID. I paid a lot of attention to it and saw everyone doing it and was like, wow, people are making their own bread. Cool. I'm homeschooling 2 kids, so I have no time for that. But now I've been thinking about getting into sourdough and being like, oh, I want to try this. I do bake my own bread all the time. And this was like a match made in heaven because I got to be guided through this process very kindly.
Like a kind judge.
Yeah, exactly.
But Heather didn't.
No. Okay, well, let's just get it out of the way before we start talking. I started my starter. Let's just say it was a non-starter. I don't know what happened. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. I could tell it wasn't. And I'd ask Aaron, okay, what does yours look like? And is it growing? And is it doing whatever? And mine was just not the same. And it was not bubbling quite as much. And it was like, I don't know what happened, but it was like a dud. I started it again. I have one going now that looks much different. So I feel like somehow doing the same thing with the same bags of flour and everything, I have somehow figured it out the second time. So I'm at day 10 today. So I promise I will follow up later when I've made
good activity.
Yeah. Oh, it looks good. It looks much different. So that's how I know the first one wasn't working. So anyway, now we all know my starter didn't work. Aaron's did. Thankfully, she can.
This was a little bit nerve-wracking too, because Heather's like,
it's on you.
It's your job to make this happen. And I was like, oh God, here we go. We're gonna have Larry on being like, so we tried and we failed. No,
just one of us. No, but not yet. I haven't completely failed yet.
You haven't totally failed. We made a starter, which was really cool to do. It's its own little beast. My son has recently finished his first semester in foods class. It's not called home ec anymore, which I was schooled on when he came home. They had discussed sourdough and sourdough starters in class. And so when your instructions came in, I said, will you help me with it? And so we started our pet, as we called it. His name was Joe, which we shared with you and is funny enough also apparently your son's name.
Yes. He goes by Joseph, but
okay.
Same name.
Yeah.
Yours probably liked because it had a nice name. Mine was Blob. It probably just was offended.
Yeah.
There we go.
It resented your control over it.
Yeah.
So Joe was really loved. Everyone got so excited when in the morning we woke up and that line was on our jar and all of a sudden
it's way above.
He was way above it. But
why don't we start at the beginning?
Okay.
Larry, why don't you tell us how do you make a sourdough starter?
I've made sourdough starter and it's failed just like you, Heather. And I didn't let that deter me. I came across this process where you use pineapple juice to get it going. Different flours have different amounts of bacteria and things on it. And rye is one that has lots of good stuff to get things going. So you start out with some rye flour and some pineapple juice, and then you gradually start adding in your wheat flours using regular water. What the pineapple juice does is it sets the right acidity that the good bacteria and yeast are fine with and the bad ones don't like. So it helps get things going, gives you a better chance of success and that you won't get some weird things. Because my first starter had all sorts of weird colors in it, which I knew wasn't good. And then you keep feeding it a little bit each day. After it takes about a week-ish, and then you should start seeing some bubbles, and then you start getting excited, and you just keep feeding it and encouraging it along, talking to it if you're so inclined. A little bit crazy, but you can if you want. And then eventually you get this thing that's starting to double and triple in size, and then it's ready to make your first loaf of bread. It shouldn't take a lot of time. The initial getting the starter going, you're doing something every day, but it's like for 2 or 3 minutes and then you're done. So it doesn't take a lot of time, but you can be making sourdough bread in 2 weeks. And the actual bread making process doesn't take a whole lot of time. Hands-on time is probably less than half an hour to make a loaf of bread, but it's spread out over time.
What is it in the starter or the process that gives it that sourdough flavor that we know is sourdough?
That would be the bacteria that are in there. So there's yeast and bacteria that they're in the air, and every sourdough starter is going to be different depending on where you are. And you have a different set of bacteria and yeast in your environment than I do in mine. And they produce different flavors and flavor profiles. And you can play around to get how sour it is by how much sourdough starter ends up in your bread. And that's how you can control that a bit. But it comes from the bacteria. The yeast gives it flavor also, but the rise. And by having less of it in there, it'll be less sour. Put a little bit more in, it becomes more pronounced.
And how does that affect the rise then, if you're using more in your bread?
It doesn't actually.
Oh, that's interesting.
You'll still get the same amount of rise because the yeast makes more yeast, which helps contribute to the rise.
Oh, so it's more dependent on what you're feeding it rather than how much of the feeder you're putting in to make it.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
You're controlling it by how much food.
Yeah, it'll double in size quicker than if you use a smaller portion.
Okay.
But you can control the timing as how much stuff you put in. And you also have to worry about temperature as well.
So when we went to make the levain for making the bread, we then named him Levi. And so then Levi was our friend for a day.
And then you baked them.
And then we baked him and we ate him and we made sourdough bread.
She's made 3 loaves now.
Excellent. Because all these things are in baker's percentages. So you can actually take this recipe, put it in a spreadsheet, and adjust things, keep all those percentages the same, and everything will adjust. And you can change how many loaves you need to make or the size of the loaf. And this is where the spreadsheets and math helps. Now, first off, the most important thing is to get a scale. Use a scale for doing any baking. And then you can just play around with it. This basic sourdough recipe is based on 100% flour. So everything else is based off of that 1,000 grams. And that's how the baker's percentage works.
Okay.
So you can play around with that flour within there. You can make it all white flour. You can make it all whole wheat flour if you wanted to. You can put some rye in there. As long as you keep it at that 1,000 grams, everything should kind of work out. And I put that kind of in there because if you start increasing the amount of whole wheat flour in it, it absorbs water slightly differently. So you might need to add more water. And it's just something that comes with practice and how you use it. And you can go and experiment with different grains. Like this past weekend, I made some bread using red fife grains that I milled myself that came from Chatsworth Farms.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, I saw your post about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so you can do that. You can get spelt grain. You can get kamut grain. You can get einkorn grain. There's all sorts of different grains you can get out there. Rye, and play around and get different flavors and profiles of your bread.
What's the difference between all-purpose flour and bread flour?
The type of wheat that is used in it. Bread flour will have more protein in it, and in Canada it comes typically from hard red spring wheat, and that protein helps with developing the gluten and all that. All-purpose flour will have less of that. It'll have a mix of grains in there, and it will tend to have a slightly lower protein. Having said all that, we're kind of lucky in Canada. Our all-purpose flour is perfectly fine for making bread.
That's good to know.
The grains we grow in Canada tend to have higher protein. And the other thing is unbleached versus bleached. Try and use unbleached because it's just less chemicals in it and it's a little bit more pure. I like to use organic flours and stuff just because they have more of the beneficial bacteria and things on it so that you get a better flavor, better tasting bread. And you tend to be supporting local farmers a lot more by doing that as well. But the chlorination process is useful in flour on certain cakes and that because you need a certain acidity to make some of the things in a cake happen. For bread, it's less important, but trying to get something as pure as possible.
So I got to taste Erin's first loaf. There was like an air pocket at the top of her loaf. So how does that happen? What happens there to create the distribution of air within the loaf?
There's a couple things that could have happened. It could have happened from the way it was shaped. It could be that it was not proofed properly. So don't despair. Make another batch.
As she did.
As you did. because it happens even after making thousands of loaves, you'll still get a little, oh, how did that happen?
Oh, okay.
But it's probably around the shaping and the pre-shaping of the bread. How was the second loaf?
The second loaf was better. I found the first one was very dense. Yeah, the bottom was very
Gummy?
packed and gummy. Yeah, that's a good word for it. And then the top was just kind of like there was that gap. There, like you say, there's so much information that the stretching and folding to get the gluten to kind of hold the air within all those little pockets, it maybe just kind of broke and all kind of popped up to the top.
Yeah. So now that you've given me that information, I am fairly confident that it was slightly overproofed as well.
Oh, okay.
Probably could have shaped it sooner. What happens when it overproofs? They tend to they may look like they're right. You'll get a little burst of it, but then it'll kind of sink down, and that'll contribute to the bubble forming at the top and also that gumminess at the bottom. And again, there's a whole bunch of science you could get into testing the pH and when it's all ready and stuff like that. But it's
You're giving her ideas now. She likes this kind of stuff.
Can I get some pH strips and just test my dough?
No, you need to, it's easier to get a proper pH meter.
Oh.
It's better to underproof than overproof.
Okay.
So actually what you'll often do is, I can't remember the name, it's a French name again. You will sometimes take a piece of dough and put it into a separate thing, kind of like a test tube.
Right, yeah.
So that you can better see when it doubles in size. So you could do something like that. If it's a bowl or something like that, how do you tell when it's double the size?
Yeah, sometimes hard to tell.
I thought it had something to do with my gluten.
Yeah. Possibly.
I went down that road and started reading more about the window pane test because I think I've read this in every recipe that I've ever made that has some sort of dough where gluten's developing, but I had never actually learned or done a proper window pane test.
We do 4 sets of folds. Check it before you do your first one. There's a good way to learn. It's just going to tear apart. You're not going to be able to make the window pane. Always do it before you do your stretch and folds. So do your first set of stretch and folds and let it sit for half an hour. You test it again. Still probably going to break on the second one. Third one, it might hold a little bit longer. And then by the fourth one, it should be a good window pane where you stretch the dough out and you can see your hand behind it. If it's still breaking, do another set. It should be good. I don't think I've ever taken it past 5. So there's a combination of factors, but I think the overproofing was the bigger one.
So cool. I'm going to be making it again tonight. This is what's going to happen is I'm going to start this again today because I feel like I can't stop now because I've got the starter out. It's only going to take me a little bit of time and going through the process again and again because it's so much fun.
Don't forget to feed me as you need your official taste tester.
No, this is good.
The first loaf that I tried, I mean, the flavor was fantastic. It definitely is a sourdough.
Yeah.
Like you can taste it. It was delicious.
The nice thing about it is usually it may not look pretty, but you could use it for croutons. You could use it for crostini or something like that to make breadcrumbs out of it. It's still usable usually. It's hard to fail.
It would have to be really bad not to eat it.
So when we're doing this and we've got our starter, got it on your countertop when you're using it, how long can we put it into the fridge for when we decide, oh, I'm not going to make sourdough for a little while now? How long will it live in the fridge?
I've done it for 6 weeks approximately.
Oh, okay.
So it was perfectly fine. About 2 months is about the maximum. And there's other ways you can stick some in the freezer. You can dry it out and then rehydrate it. There's different ways. Give it to Heather if you're going away for a long time
I can babysit
it.
Joe.
If you're at home, I highly recommend just refreshing it once a week.
Okay.
Do that a couple times, put it back in the fridge.
Okay.
That just keeps it more vibrant.
Yeah.
So when I refresh it, do I let it do its doubling and go through its process before I pop it in the fridge, or would I want to feed it and then just put it into the fridge directly?
Let it do its doubling and then put it in the fridge.
Well, I think it's going to be a little while before I do that.
Yeah,
I've caught the bug.
Typically what I do is mix up the levain. I'll have a little bit of sourdough starter left and just put it in a container, put it in the fridge. And then it's there ready to go for the next time. And if you get a bunch of black liquid on top because you've left it for 2 or 3 weeks, just pour that off.
What's that?
It's just alcohol. Don't drink it. Get some good gin or something like that instead. Don't drink alcohol.
Good thing you said that because, I'll drink just about anything.
Yeah, just pour it off. It kind of looks gross.
Yeah, I would be thinking something's
I'd
gone
be
really
afraid
wrong.
of that. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yep.
Are there any myths or old wives' tales about making bread you totally dismiss because they're false?
Despite weighing things out, I think I'm pretty easygoing. There's some people think that you have to be so exacting, and people are going to see this recipe and think, oh my God, 48 grams. I have to be super exact with this. There's leeway on either side of these numbers. You can, as long as you're kind of in the ballpark, you're good to go. Some people get really precise. They buy proofing things. They keep the starter at a certain temperature. You don't need to do that. Just feed it every once in a while and you're going to be good to go. You don't need to get a whole bunch of special equipment or anything like that. It should be something that doesn't take much time and something that you can enjoy. But if you want to go down that path, go down that path.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that.
That's good advice.
It is important to be quite precise with some things with baking. So it's good to know that there's a little bit of flexibility. Well, this has been really fun. And I feel now like I've learned a little bit more. So when I attempt my starter, and I also have, I can phone a friend. I've got 2 friends right here who can help me if I need help, which very well might happen. Now, we wanted to do something a little bit fun. We often do a rapid fire question segment, but I stumbled upon something else yesterday. It is a BuzzFeed quiz called "Which Type of Bread Are You?"
Oh, okay.
So it's like one of those personality quizzes, and it's going to tell us what type of bread you are. So I'm going to ask you the questions as best I can. I'm going to put your answers in, and we're going to see what kind of bread you are.
Okay.
All right. It says here, what type of flour do you use most often?
Bread. I'll go with bread.
When you are thirsty, how do you quench your thirst?
I'd like to say beer, but it's usually water.
What's your favorite kind of pizza?
Ham and pineapple.
Oh, perfect. I can pick that one. Which hand emoji best describes your abilities in the kitchen?
How about the muscle?
Which type of oil do you prefer?
Well, I'm going to say olive oil because butter isn't technically oil.
Everybody loves butter. Okay.
Let's go with olive oil.
Okay. Now this says, who's your favorite cooking show host?
Anna Olsen.
All right, let's pick
with
her.
a Canadian.
Yeah. Okay. Pick an herb.
Basil.
Okay. Which baking term best describes your personality?
Unleavened.
Okay. Pick a baked good.
The pain au chocolat, the chocolate croissant.
Yeah, me too. You are a marble rye. It says
Oh.
you starred in an episode of Seinfeld about 20 years ago. Unfortunately, your fame has died down a bit since then, but have no fear. You've definitely got a loyal following, Marble Rye.
Nothing wrong with the marbled rye.
Hey, you probably do you actually do have a loyal following.
Yeah.
People love to see your bread photos. And
Yeah.
why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you and follow you?
Probably the best place is on Instagram, Harris Larry D, all one word on Instagram. The same thing is on Facebook and on Twitter, although I haven't done anything on Twitter for probably about 3 months now. So Instagram's the best place. Stay tuned, maybe some YouTube stuff coming out in the future.
Oh, fun.
And I think I saw that the Great Canadian Baking Show is auditioning again.
Yes, in Edmonton. They're doing some first live auditions that they're doing since 2019. It's an open call, so I'm looking forward to seeing past bakers and all the people trying to get on it.
Oh, nice.
Montreal, Edmonton, and then Winnipeg, I think.
And are you playing a part in that?
Yeah, I'm just going there to be a baking star, I guess.
Please tell me you get to taste test all the...
Yeah, we get to taste test. And I know there's a bunch of other bakers that were on the show previously as well to cheer on the bakers trying to get on the show.
That's fun. And everybody, you can still go back and watch season 4 and watch Larry in action.
Yes, on CBC Gem.
Yeah.
So CBC Gem is the place to see the Great Canadian Baking Show. And I guess they'll have season 7 out in the fall sometime.
That's
fantastic.
Fun. Thank you so much for teaching us about sourdough and sharing your recipe with us and coming on the podcast. You're the first baker that we've had on the show, and it's been educational. I'll definitely say that. There's a lot to it, and it's a little intimidating. And if anyone listening feels a little intimidated by sourdough, now we know.
Don't be intimidated.
Yeah, you can't really screw it up. You're still going to get something at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been such a fun process. It's very rewarding.
It definitely is. And there's nothing, even just baking a loaf of bread and giving it to a friend like Heather. And
I'm so glad you're like in my corner here, encouraging Erin to bake for me. And the gym is always here when you need to come burn it off.
Yeah.
Thank you, Larry.
You're most welcome. It's been very enjoyable. Love chatting with you guys, and forward to next time.
Yeah, come back.
Yes.
Talk about some other kind of bread.
Sure.
And now for the fine print. Join us over on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest, and on our website at threekitchenspodcast.com. And remember, when you like, follow, subscribe, and review, it helps more people find us. Thank you so much for listening.
It could be made a lot smaller. I just have to use a different font.